Within South Korea, there exists a company called WeDisk. On the surface, it appeared to be just another generic software startup with a rags to riches tech CEO. Though, if you actually look behind closed doors, you'd see neon-haired employees running one of the largest exploitation upload operations in the entire country. This is the story of WeDisk and the company's owner, chairman, and mastermind, Jinho. Let's begin with a quick overview of what the company WeDisk began as in the early 2000s. WeDisk was a company in what Koreans call the web hard industry, which is just a fancy term to mean a company that deals with online file storage and downloads for a price. WeDisk was at many points in time the #1 ranked file sharing website in terms of sales in all of South Korea. Initially, WeDisk followed a similar path and trajectory to most other file sharing sites around the world, with it originally being used for relatively tame needs, like users uploading important files they'd like to have online backups of, or things they'd want to share with friends and family. Though it didn't take long before the upload of users moved toward copyrighted works and piracy. Very quickly, movies, books, music, dramas, and other copyrighted works from across the world were being uploaded and far overtook legitimate traffic and usage. Now, while a normal tech company would take copyright seriously, Yang had the exact opposite approach. Seeing as copyright files were by far the most popular type of material on his site, he began having his staff upload copyright works themselves to help drive more traffic and profits. These uploads weren't just to WeDisk, but to partnered sites as well. Though Yang wasn't foolish. He knew that he'd eventually be caught for this crime, so he took a preemptive measure. Since he knew his fines and damages would be based on the amount of downloads a file would have, he decided to fake the publicly shown traffic and downloads on all copyrighted works. By hiding the real data, when copyright owners came to collect damages, he could grossly underreport and underpay on fees, since he could now claim a copyright file only had 100 downloads instead of the tens of thousands it actually had. Though, this scheme wouldn't last for long and would fall apart in 2011. When Yang would be arrested and charged for illegally distributing more than 50,000 copyrighted works, and officially charged for embezzling damages that should have been paid to their respective copyright owners. By cheating the download numbers on WeDisk, Yang was able to collect an additional 15.2 billion won while the scheme was active. In addition, one of these partnered sites where these uploads were going to was FileNori. This used to be the third-ranked web hard company in South Korea, though FileNori wasn't actually a separate company or a partner site, but actually another company secretly owned by Yang himself, this knowledge only coming to light post-arrest. Once prosecution kicked into gear, it was also revealed that WeDisk's annual sales were 25 billion won and FileNori's were 15 billion won, for a grand total of 40 billion won, not including the embezzled amounts, which would have been approximately 38 million USD at the time. Yang would end up being sentenced and serve some minor prison time from this case. This prison time was mainly due to him already having a criminal record related to drugs and abuse. If not for his pre-existing criminal record, it was speculated he would have been free to walk away with a minor slap on the wrist, since it's been believed for many years prior to his arrest that Yang had connections to powerful figures and legal circles. Now, following his public arrest case and release, you'd think Yang would now be more cautious and wary of partaking in illegal activities so openly and brazenly, but this actually emboldened him to go even further than he had previously. Once Yang was back at his company, he decided to shift the employees' uploads from focusing on copyrighted works to pornography instead. Now, South Korea isn't the kind of country you'd want to be sharing pornography within, since the production, distribution, and possession of any and all types of pornography is completely illegal within the country. So this is an even greater risk legally speaking, and a significantly more dangerous type of content to upload and host, especially compared to the privacy scheme he had been doing previously. Regardless, with the new porn uploads now flowing through the site on a steady basis, users decided to upload pornography as well, seeing as the content was steadily increasing on the site and wasn't being removed. Originally, users were uploading legal videos from major publishers from countries such as Japan or the USA, though this quickly spiraled into something else. As the uploads were increasing, the type of content was becoming more extreme and disgusting. Specifically, significant amount of revenge porn and spy cam porn were now being uploaded onto WeDisk. Just like in the case of copyrighted works, Yang saw no issue with this and decided to jump in on these new trends himself. Not to mention that for these files, there were no copyright holders to pay royalties and damages to. So Yang actually had a greater interest in uploading and sharing this type of content on his sites. Though there's a slight problem with his plan. This isn't exactly a simple or easy to find material, so Yang reached out to the various uploaders of this material with the most downloads and offered to share the profits in the millions of won if they kept uploading more. Not only was he offering them a cut of the profits, but Yang was also acting as their watchdog. When WeDisk would get reports from the Korea Communication Standards Commission relating to this content and would be asked to forward information on the users that uploaded it, he'd message the uploaders and help walk them through how to get a new ID in advance so they could escape arrest and continue uploading their revenge or spy content. After the steady stream of revenge and spy content was secured, Yang wouldn't be satisfied with just a few users of his site uploading such material. Now he wanted WeDisk employees to search the internet for more content of this nature and upload it themselves. He also wanted employees to go through the WeDisk site catalog and help spread the files they already had onto FileNori and other web hard sites. Though even that wouldn't be enough for Yang. Afterwards, he created special units within his company and had them create special software to help automate the upload of this content, not just to his sites, but various file sharing sites. In addition to the uploads, he also wanted it to appear as though many users were uploading this content, and not just a handful of accomplices and employees. So he'd also help secure hundreds of fake IDs for his employees so they could pose as multiple users online across the various sites. After completing this stage of his plans, a few months later he'd push the envelope further yet again. Yang would now go and make backroom deals with various other web hard companies. One deal was for the other web hard companies to forward and upload any rare revenge or spy files that would be posted onto their sites back onto the ones Yang controlled. This was done since he wanted to have the most complete and full catalog for this type of material. Through the start of these type of deals and processes, Yang would eventually become the center of revenge porn distribution in South Korea and be known as one of the heads of the web hard cartel. Now, you may be asking yourself, surely there's a way for victims to report this material to authorities and have it removed. And you'd be partially right. Though this is where another one of Yang's backroom deals would start coming into effect. Now, unlike in the West where you report directly to authorities, within South Korea there are what is known as filtering companies and digital funeral companies. Filtering companies, like the name implies, are companies that can help individuals or other companies filter out or hide certain things on the internet, with a large focus on spy cam related content, otherwise known as a molka in Korea. Digital funeral or digital mortician companies, on the other hand, are companies specializing in having files permanently deleted. Naturally, victims of the revenge and spy files being uploaded will go to these type of companies in hopes of getting the material involving them removed from the web. But Yang knew this as well, so as part of his web hard cartel plans, he went and made backroom deals with various filtering and digital funeral companies as well. Specifically, he wanted cases regarding these type of files forward to companies such as Mareka, Monster, Kontak, or other more trusted member companies within the cartel. Since Yang had so much control and influence within these three spheres, the attempts victims made at removing the revenge and spy content on his sites largely had very little to show for it. Specifically, what would happen would be the following. Victims of this revenge or spy content would become aware of its existence on one of the various web hard sites. Their next step would be going to a digital mortician company and paying for their services in hopes of getting the material in question deleted and removed permanently from the web. Now, once the victim bought one of these services, the company would either forward the request to an accomplice company or to WeDisk directly. From here, there were two possible paths. If the company making the request wasn't part of the Web Hard Cartel alliance, the request would be honored and the file would be deleted, followed by a re-upload online a few days later on one of the other various web hard sites. This was a deliberate choice by Yang since it resulted in a win-win scenario for him. Either the victim would give up attempting to have the material taken down, allowing WeDisk to eventually have it up indefinitely, or the victim would now try using a different digital mortician company. This would be the second path, where the victim would reach out to a company like Mareka that's part of the Web Hard Cartel. Now when the request would go through to WeDisk, they'd actually remove the file and seemingly prevent its re-upload across the various sites. Quite strange, isn't it? Why would Yang hide the content if he got a delete request from a company within his own cartel? Well, the reasons are good, to put it mildly. By hiding the upload when the request is from one of his other member companies, it built a lot of trust in the victims that his companies were better than the competitors not part of the cartel. Second, since the company showed results, it made it more likely the victim would go to his companies again in the future. This reoccurring usage from the victim was the main hook Yang was after, since Yang would have the material re-uploaded on his various sites, let's say in approximately 3 months' time. Once users of these sites saw the content re-uploaded, there would be a new surge of downloads with many wanting to save a copy for themselves. The victim would catch on yet again and would return to one of Yang's filtering companies, and would once again pay to have the content removed, creating an absolutely insane cycle where Yang would be able to recycle the same exploitation material over and over again, profiting from both the users of the site rushing to download the re-upload and the victim in question yet again paying for the filtering service. Sometimes he'd even have his own staff reach out to the victims about the content re-upload and suggest which filtering companies to use. This means a lot of the exploitation material on his sites was never truly deleted. Yang was simply repeatedly charging the victims the illusion of help until any of the following happened. They either gave up, ran out of money and couldn't request continued deletion, or he deemed it too risky to try charging the specific victim again, so filtering rules were applied on certain sites temporarily. Yang was constantly extorting the victims of this exploitation material and abusing the victims' desperation. Some of these victims did end up taking their own lives. Now, let's talk a bit more about the Moretta company I've been mentioning. While all these things were happening, the general public and some authorities thought of Moretta as a separate filtering company from Yong's other businesses. It was supposed to be a third-party neutral company focused on removing exploitative materials online. What wasn't known until years and years later was Yong had secretly bought out the company and instructed the senior staff to handle and turn a blind eye to his illegal activities, meaning one of the companies that were supposed to be tackling this exact type of illegal activity was actually controlled by the head of the crime cartel. This made it very difficult for authorities to catch on to Yong for quite a long while. In the aftermath of this info coming to light, web-hard regulations were strengthened and Korea's pornography laws became even stricter. Yong would be punished and arrested yet again, but before we dive into that, there's a few more things we need to cover. First, the general public and many women's groups weren't happy with Yong being the only one brought down, since there's an elephant in the room we haven't talked about much yet, namely Yong's thousands of employees across his various companies who were the ones actually doing all this dirty work for him. Many women's groups rightfully accused the WeDisk employees as being accomplices, but what made the employees so willing to do this kind of work for Yong? Was the salary great at Yong companies? The answer is no. Many employees were being paid well under the average salary for their position. Did they gain special benefits or status from working with Yong? Once again, the answer is no. So why did his employees do whatever Yong wanted? Well, this is going to be an incredibly bizarre and disgusting series of events. Let's start by looking at some of the things one former employee wrote about Yong and his company after he quit. The former employee would type the following comments online using Yong's full name as the display name. He would post the following comments online: "I'm working non-stop. I'm having lots of trouble at my job. Even if I work diligently, will I get a huge salary increase?" Not exactly scandalous or crazy comments by any means, but these comments completely and utterly enraged Yong, leading to Yong sending various threatening messages over Kakao Talk to the employee and demands for the employee to come to the office immediately, resulting in the following video in 2015.
살려도 똑바로 사과해. 진정성 있게. 울 줄 알아. 똑바로 해. 큰 소리로. 죄송합니다.
Now, you might be asking yourself what happened to the employee of recording this video and the one being abused. Did Yong abuse the employee of recording this as well? Were they fired? Well, as it turns out, Yong himself was the one that instructed the employee to record this video. He wanted to have the video as a souvenir for himself. He would also have it played within the company a few times to show other employees what would happen if they ever went against his orders. The harassment Yong directed to the employee didn't stop after this video either. In fact, Yong increased his harassment and threatening calls and messages. The end result was the employee was scared for his life and has moved to the countryside on a remote island off the mainland, now living a secluded life. The employee says he's still suffering from psychological distress caused by Yong. He has given mixed responses on whether or not he wants to take any legal action. The employee has probably realized filing a legal complaint against Yong isn't guaranteed, and if he goes through with it, his safety isn't guaranteed either. The news crew that would eventually interview the employee said it was incredibly difficult to get the employee to talk about the incident at all. From an interview with the employee years later, he would mention that Yong has a violent temper and a deep resentment for anyone that he thinks wronged him in any way. The employee seems to believe if he tries to do anything against Yong, Yong would have someone beat him again at the minimum, and there's a possibility of his life itself being in danger. Eventually, reporters from News to Pop would request an interview with Yong in 2018 after the assault video was posted online.
취재진은 양 씨 집으로 찾아가 그를 만났습니다.
회장님 잠깐만 시간 내주시죠. 작가님은 됩니다. 혹시 아시죠?
하지만 양 씨는 답변을 거부했습니다.
회장님! 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 혹시 아시죠? 회장님! 혹시 2015년에 회장님! 아시죠?
뉴스타파 강현석입니다.
but Yang would refuse to have any interviews. The reason Yang gave for his refusal was, quote, "I'm the father of young children, so I'm protecting them." This is Yang's only comment in regards to the assault of his former employee and why he's refused to have any interviews related to it. Now, as for why Yang abused his employees in such a manner, one of the reasons that were speculated online among Koreans for Yang's employee abuse was due to him trying to tighten his control over his companies, since he was still very bitter about being forced to serve prison time back in 2011, and he blamed his old employees for his arrest. So now he was taking out his anger on his current employees and trying to ensure they wouldn't be part of his downfall yet again. Now, the assault done on the former employee wasn't the only thing Yang did to his employees, not by a long shot. Yang would do a lot of incredibly odd things with his employees. One of the more tame things Yang would do is, when he saw a color he liked, for example when he saw a Korean food, he'd say something like, "I like the color of that sundae liver. Dye your hair the same color." Yang would make many employees and executives in their 40s and 50s at his company dye their hair random colors he liked in the spur of the moment for his amusement. Yang himself dyed his hair green, red, and other colors at different points in time. Yang would also force employees to eat vitamins 10 times the standard amount needed, and would allegedly conduct medical examinations every year personally on his employees. Some employees were reported they would have constant diarrhea and claimed Yang would say things like, "No matter how much vitamins you eat, cancer patients don't go to the bathroom. These health checkups are to confirm this." Yang treated his employees as if they were livestock and his company as his personal kingdom. Yang also had a weird fixture on washrooms and washroom usage, and this would also extend to when he would have office drinking parties. Yang once hosted an office drinking party where he basically forbid all the employees from using the washrooms. Some employees that went to the washroom were fined 100,000 won each. If the employees didn't pay the fines themselves, Yang would instruct the manager to deduct it from their salaries instead. This custom became so normal and widespread, even during normal work hours, employees feared and avoided going to the washrooms. Returning to the topic of the office space, Yang also had hidden cameras at his companies that were filming female employees and focused on recording specific body parts. Yang would also eventually claim to have a photography hobby to his employees, mainly to his female ones. He'd call up random female employees on the weekend and have them model for him, and he would take pictures they didn't consent to. It was said if he refused him, it was the same as saying you quit, since any failure to listen to Yang's orders or requests would end up in your immediate firing at the minimum. In some of the pictures Yang took, or himself requested to be taken, you can see him threatening employees with a weapon. In another photo, you can see Yang writing his own name on a female employee's thighs. Another strange thing Yang would do sometimes, he'd go around the office with a BB gun and shoot at the employees while they were working. According to a witness, Yang himself would get shot by a BB gun too while he was having business meetings with different departments. Another extremely bizarre event that was orchestrated by Yang was Yang would hold a memorial service where he would have the nails, hair, and blood of employees buried alongside voodoo dolls with the name of the employees written on it. A person partially in charge of the event said the purpose was for Yang to receive the energy of the young employees. In the same locations as these memorial services were being performed, Yang also made his employees attempt to find gold bars buried on the grounds. He believed there was gold buried there during the Japanese colonial period of Korea. He also apparently contacted high-ranking officials within South Korea to help him search for and find the remains of An Yeon-gun. An Yeon-gun was a Korean independence activist. He is remembered as a martyr in both South and North Korea for his 1909 assassination of the Japanese politician Ito Hirobumi, who had previously served as the first Prime Minister of Japan and the Japanese Resident General of Korea. You might be thinking at this point we're nearly done, but we're not even close. Moving away from the office and woods, now we're headed to Yang's private compound. Yang would mandate various employees to go with him to his private compound and force many of his employees to smoke marijuana. Yang would use various drugs himself, and he made his employees partake in his various drug habits for his own amusement. 7 employees who talked about their time at the compound and that admitted to smoking marijuana were arrested by police. Korea, unlike Western countries, has an extremely strong stance against marijuana, where smoking marijuana can get you up to 5 years in prison and a 50 million won fine on top of that. It's even illegal for Koreans to use the substance outside of the country. Though there's a lot more to these compound stories than simply drugs. After Yang made his employees smoke, he also made them hunt chickens with a bow and arrow. If the employees couldn't catch a chicken or fire the bow correctly, Yang would have all the employees gather around and throw insults at the failing employee. Afterwards, when the chicken was caught, Yang would throw the live chicken at the employee and have them try cutting off their heads with a katana. Strangely enough, these videos at his compound were once again requested by Yang himself to have them recorded. There is much more info and stories relating to his employees, but we'll save that for a later section in this video. Now, if someone is treating and abusing their employees like this, you can be sure others aren't safe from their wrath and insanity either. Yang was also incredibly abusive to his now ex-wife. Yang, during his marriage, had suspected his wife was having an affair with a Korean university professor back in December of 2013. Yang would one day call this professor to his WeDisk office during normal work hours when employees were working and present. Yang would have his brother and 2 others with him in his office waiting that day. When the professor finally arrived, he asked the professor point blank if he was having an affair with his wife. The professor responded, "No, there's no affair or adult relations. We used to be classmates and we've been friends for a very long time." Well, it doesn't seem like the answer mattered to Yang, since he had his entire office group begin their assault on the professor for somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. This was within an office with clear see-through windows, where all the employees near the event would be able to see exactly what was happening. They beat and kicked the professor, spat on his face, had him lick their shoes, then rubbed phlegm on his face and then forced him to eat it afterwards. After the group beating had finished, Yang dragged the professor out to the middle of the office, where he would throw 2 million won on top of him, roughly 1,600 USD, and told him they're now even and he shouldn't bother with this matter anymore. Naturally, the professor after the assault immediately went and talked to the police. He reported what Yang and his gang did to him, but the police didn't bother collecting any evidence, like the professor's suit, which from head to toe was still covered in fresh blood from him, not to mention having fingerprints from both Yang and his gang. The police would go and do a short investigation and speak to Yang directly. When they came back from the investigation, they reported that nothing had happened and the professor was making it up. The employees at the company didn't say anything. Yang and his crew didn't get any fines or charges for this incident. It was as if this entire event didn't happen at all on the books. The professor afterward didn't continue pursuing the matter, but he also didn't give up fully either. He put away his suit with blood on it from the assault and kept it, waiting for the day he could bring it forward to be used as evidence to help bring down Yang. 4 years later, the professor would end up filing another legal complaint against Yang. This time he was able to get the involvement of the Seoul High Prosecutor's Office. With their review of the case, progress would be made this time. They had concluded that it was highly likely that Yang and the others had committed the assault and ordered a full reinvestigation. Because of the original lukewarm response from the police the professor originally spoke to 4 years ago, this would solidify the suspicions many Koreans had that Yang had powerful friends and was paying off the police, plus prosecutors and others to avoid facing any consequences for the many crimes he was and still is continuing to commit. The professor also wouldn't be the only educator Yang would beat up. There's another report that would come out much later where Yang would beat up one of his children's teachers, because he suspected that the teacher in question was having an affair with his now ex-wife. These beatings would become a source of debate for many Koreans. Many were debating whether or not Yang actually cared for his ex-wife, or if he was simply beating up people close to her so she'd be too scared to publicly talk about Yang's drug habits. Since once again, Korea is a very strict country in terms of drugs, and Yang was alleged to have been doing far more than simply smoking marijuana. What gave credence to this debate was Yang himself has publicly made statements denying using methamphetamines on different occasions. But given his behaviors and stories so far, I think it's safe to say Yang was experimenting with far more than marijuana alone in his life. Somehow, we're still not done with the abuse stories. Yang's neighbors also wouldn't be safe from him either. Yang would park his various luxury cars on his neighbor's property and have them washed there. His neighbors rightfully and politely asked him not to park on their property, so Yang did the only sensible thing. He had various lawsuits filed against the neighbors and their properties, along with making threats for them to move. Eventually, this would become too much for his neighbors and they would put their houses up for sale and prepare to move. You'd think this would make Yang happy, seeing as though he basically won. But he still wouldn't let the matter rest. After his neighbors had put their houses up for sale, he would try to ruin any sale attempts made by very publicly telling any potential buyers of the houses that the property and owner were in a lawsuit and the purchase of the house would be a bad choice. He'd also turn up the noise in his house to obscene levels and leave it playing 24/7 simply to bother his neighbors at all hours of the day and night. Incredibly enough, even Yang's own business partners weren't safe from his abuse either. He would constantly and loudly scream at them and choose to use violence to solve problems rather than conversation with them. What little amount of text messages were able to be recovered from authorities between Yang and his partners had nothing but insults and death threats. Absolutely no one was safe from Yang, whether they were friends, foe, or bystander. Alright, now we're finally done with the known and confirmed physical abuse stories. Now, let's move towards 2018 when Yang would finally be brought down, and see what other crimes would now be confirmed. Also, bear in mind all of these crimes were happening from at the very least 2011 to 2018. Now, let's start moving to Yang's other financial crimes. Now, at the start of the video, we talked about how Yang was embezzling money from copyright holders by cheating the damages and download numbers. Naturally, that wasn't the only form of embezzling he was doing. Yang was also embezzling around 280 million won periodically from his own company WeDisk. The money he was embezzling should have been handed to his executives and criminal units. I guess no honor among thieves, as the saying goes. Yang would also brazenly commit tax evasion as well, though the exact figures still aren't known yet. The money he was skimming would be used for two purposes. One was to funnel into companies he was secretly controlling in the shadows, or that illegally owned in the public view. Like I mentioned earlier, one of these companies was Mereka. But what wasn't known until around 2018, Monster and Kontak were also secretly owned and controlled by Yang. He also used a large portion of these funds to fund his other massive tech company, Hankook Mirai Technology, a company focused on building robotics that was famously in the news for the Method 2 robot. The second big reason Yang was scheming with the company funds behind the other executives' backs, he wanted to have a large war chest filled with money, so when the law would come knocking, he'd be able to defend himself and bribe the officials with much greater amounts than any other executive within his companies, as a means of trying to ensure his own safety above all others. This would end up being confirmed in 2018 and confirming a lot of Korean speculations about Yang having friends in high places. From one of the employee comments, Yang would actually bring prosecutors into his company and would have them instruct the staff on what to say in order to get cases dismissed or thrown out. Naturally, WeDisk wasn't the only company Yang was doing these shady things with. He'd jump around his various different companies a lot as well, where it was eventually reported that he raised 3 billion won through his slush funds from his many companies. Yang's slush funds would be investigated in 2018 as well. While the investigation of these slush funds were ongoing, Yang would also manage to catch a charge of sexual assault, where it was believed he sexually assaulted a woman at his office. Though the case was during a period of private prosecution, so the charges were dropped and very limited details were given to the public. Though, based on everything we know so far, I think beyond a shadow of a doubt we can assume that the incident did happen. Now, a question you might have been asking yourself throughout this video: why did it take over 7 years for authorities to actually catch on to Yang's various crimes? Surely with thousands of employees, someone would say something, and there would be some concrete proof over the years. Well, the answer to that is Yang was a suspicious man and didn't trust anyone, especially after his prison time in 2011. He had all employees using Canon phones and had them use pseudonyms like an actual criminal organization. They used these phones to communicate their exploitation uploads, and if they were revealed to have been working together, they would be instructed to abandon and destroy the phones, in the process destroying lots of valuable evidence. Yang also followed a similar practice personally as well, where he'd cycle through phones and phone numbers constantly to avoid having a trail of himself either. Yang would also have various monitoring and spying apps installed on the phones and computers of all employees who worked for him at his many companies. He had all calls made monitored, all text messages recorded, as well as all photos saved. He also had the IDs, family information, and other personal information saved on nearly every employee in case anyone tried to step out of line. When authorities began seriously investigating, they were able to find over 100,000 pieces of data from these various apps. Over 60,000 pieces of data were recorded phone calls and text messages. It was discovered that Yang would personally examine the employees' data routinely and delete and remove anything that could be used as evidence. How much data and information had been deleted over the years prior to the investigation is unknown. It was also reported that Yang had developed his own tracking app called Izagi, which he would have secretly installed on his employees' personal devices without their knowledge, on top of all the other monitoring apps he had them knowingly install. Yang also had an in-house messaging app called HiTalk developed, which was also automatically installed on all employee work devices. The app connected the employee's phone to the employee's manager's smartphone. The managers were able to, through this app, view the contents of the connected smartphones, allowing Yang's managers to live monitor any and all employees under them. These managers were monitoring employees even outside of work. Nothing was off limits. Private family conversations, bank transfers, health details, just mind-boggling amounts of surveillance and maintenance of these employees. With all of this information rapidly being discovered and confirmed by authorities, the case against Yang finally started heating up. Yang in panic internally began offering 300 million won for any employee that would be arrested and take the fall for a few charges. He would also offer 100 million won if they received a suspended sentence, and he would double the fine fees as additional compensation. He also said he'll give employees 10 million won per hour of time if they were summoned for investigations, so long as they didn't create more pressure for him. He both offered them bribes to defend him and threats to not rat him out. Though this time Yang's luck would run out, and would finally be taken down and arrested. Over hundreds of people would have charges brought against them and arrested over the scandal. This is how it was originally reported, and I stress originally. Now, while Yang has a rap sheet over a mile long, and even that is an incomplete list of all his crimes, you'd be expecting a long and hard prison sentence to follow, right? Well, like anything in the story, it's not that simple, and some of the details are murky. Yang would initially only be sentenced to 5 years in prison, with those 5 years largely being the result of the porn distribution controversy. He'd later on get an additional 2 years for a separate charge related to the breach of trust under the Specific Economic Crime Weighted Punishment Act in June of 2023. So in total, around 7 years of prison time for everything he's done. More cases and charges were planned to be brought against Yang, with a possibility for an additional 5 years to make it a possible 12 in total. In addition to his prison time, the two web hard companies operated by former Chairman Yang were also sentenced to fines of 250 million won and 120 million won respectively for violating the Tax Evasion Punishment Act. But just remember, both of these companies were making more than 40 billion won collectively back in 2011. With the company's explosive growth over the period of 2011 to 2018, their profits and revenues have also surely skyrocketed. So these fine amounts are basically just slaps on the wrist. Excluding the minor fines, WeDisk and Filenori are both still up and running to this day, and they both still have copyright infringement material directly on their homepages. Though I'm not going to investigate and search to see if they still contain exploitative material or not. This is how the story was originally reported and supposed to end, though there's a slight wrench in that last portion of planned cases now. In the year of 2025, in the month of September, the South Korean government would experience a catastrophic data center fire, resulting in over 858 terabytes of data being lost, with no surviving backups. An incident with a shockingly gross amount of incompetence and negligence. Among the data that has now been lost, many files were relating to legal cases and crimes. The fallout from this data loss is still ongoing, but there is a slight worry that Yang might be able to escape some of his additional charges and cases now, meaning there's a possibility before this year ends or sometime in 2026 he'll be able to walk out of prison a free man without worry of getting any other charges, since he's nearly done serving the 7 years he's gotten so far. That's where the story ends for today. When there's more news related to Yang Jinho, I'll be sure to make another video. Till then, stay safe and see you next time.